In 2010, a 28-year-old accountant at PricewaterhouseCoopers in Luxembourg started copying documents after hours. Thousands of them. He burned them onto disks. Then, he walked out of the building. What he took would eventually become one of the biggest financial scandals in European history. The documents revealed secret tax agreements between Luxembourg's government and some of the largest corporations on Earth: Amazon, Apple, IKEA, Disney, Pepsi, FedEx, Heinz, hundreds of them. But here's what made those documents so explosive. They didn't prove crimes. They proved something more unsettling. They revealed that a perfectly legal, deliberately constructed system existed, by which a landlocked country of 660,000 people had quietly turned itself into the financial backbone of an entire continent. And the man whose system the documents exposed, by the time they went public, he had just been appointed president of the European Commission, the body responsible for policing exactly the kind of deals he had spent 2 decades designing. That is what this video is about: how a country most people cannot locate on a map ended up running Europe's money, and what it's quietly costing everyone else. Before the how, the numbers themselves need a moment, because they are genuinely disorienting. Luxembourg is smaller than Yorkshire. Its population is roughly the size of Glasgow. You can drive across the entire country in under 2 hours. It has no coastline, no oil, no deep water port. Its army numbers fewer than 1,000 soldiers. Its GDP per capita ranks first in the world. Not first in Europe, first in the world. The United States sits at around $85,000. Germany, Europe's industrial giant, at roughly $54,000. Luxembourg is not in the same category. It's in a different conversation entirely. And then the fund industry number. Luxembourg administers over 5 trillion euros in investment assets. That figure is larger than the annual economic output of Germany and France combined, sitting in a country with fewer residents than Edinburgh. None of this was inevitable. 50 years ago, Luxembourg was a steel country staring down the same deindustrialization that gutted cities across northern England, the Belgian Ruhr, and eastern France. What you're looking at now was built, deliberately, on the ruins of something else entirely. For most of the 20th century, Luxembourg was iron. The southern region of the country, an area called Minette, sat on some of the largest iron ore deposits in Western Europe. At the industry's peak in the 1960s, steel accounted for roughly 80% of Luxembourg's total exports. The entire economy ran on one material. Then came the 1970s oil shocks, and after them, the long structural collapse of European heavy industry. Steel prices fell. Cheaper production emerged in Asia. By the early 1980s, Luxembourg's steel industry was shedding thousands of jobs, in a country small enough that thousands of jobs could genuinely destabilize everything. What happened next is the pivot that made modern Luxembourg. The government did not wait for markets to stabilize. Successive administrations made a deliberate decision: replace steel with finance and move faster than any neighbor saw coming. They built low-tax frameworks for holding companies. They passed legislation specifically designed to attract foreign banks. They positioned Luxembourg explicitly as the financial crossroads of the European economic community. They were not the first country to try this. They were the first to do it with enough speed and precision that by the time competitors understood the opportunity, Luxembourg already owned it. The pivot toward finance had one crucial catalyst that came before the steel crisis, and it came partly by accident. In 1963, a bank called SG Warburg issued a bond in Luxembourg. The bond raised $15 million for Autostrada, the Italian motorway company. It was denominated in US dollars rather than any European currency, designed specifically to sit outside the regulatory and tax frameworks of the major economies. It became known as a Eurobond. The timing was everything. The United States had just introduced the interest equalization tax, which made it expensive for foreign borrowers to raise money in American markets. Overnight, there was massive global demand for a dollar-denominated bond market operating outside US jurisdiction. Luxembourg's government grasped the opportunity immediately and moved to accommodate it. That single early bet, being the place that said yes while other governments were still reading the paperwork, gave Luxembourg a structural position in international debt markets that compounded for 60 years. The Luxembourg Stock Exchange is today the world's leading listing venue for international bonds. All of it traces back to a $15 million deal in 1963. The bond market gave Luxembourg a foundation. What built the tower on top of it was a 1985 European Community Directive called UCITS, Undertakings for Collective Investment in Transferable Securities. The concept was straightforward. Create a standardized framework for investment funds so that a fund authorized in one EU country could be sold to retail investors across the entire bloc. Luxembourg became the first country to implement the UCITS directive into national law. That sequence mattered enormously, because in a passport system, whoever builds the most credible manufacturing base first captures the market before the infrastructure even exists elsewhere. The fund administrators came because the legal framework was in place. The custodians came because the administrators needed them. The specialist law firms grew because the custodians needed legal counsel. A self-reinforcing cluster of expertise built up over 40 years that became genuinely very difficult to displace. Today, approximately 70% of all cross-border funds distributed in Europe are domiciled in Luxembourg. When a German investor buys a global equity fund, when a French pension scheme allocates to emerging markets, when a British institution accesses an alternative investment vehicle, the odds are better than 2 in 3 that the legal wrapper holding those assets is registered in a country the size of a mid-sized English county. Which brings us back to Antoine Deltour and those documents. When the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists published the LuxLeaks files in November 2014, what they exposed was the specific mechanism behind Luxembourg's attractiveness. The revelations laid bare more than 300 secret tax deals that Luxembourg had struck with global businesses, including Disney, Skype, GlaxoSmithKline, Koch Industries, and Black & Decker. Amazon's effective tax rate in Luxembourg ran as low as 0.005% in some years. To be concrete about what that means, Amazon was routing the vast majority of its European revenues, generated by customers in Germany, France, Spain, and Britain, through a Luxembourg subsidiary. And paying a rate so close to zero, it was essentially invisible. Jean-Claude Juncker had served as Luxembourg's prime minister during the period when most of those tax rulings were approved. By 2014, he had just been appointed president of the European Commission, the very institution responsible for policing member states' tax practices. To be fair here, and this channel will always tell you when something is genuinely contested, Luxembourg and the corporations consistently maintained the arrangements were entirely legal. European courts repeatedly overturned some European Commission findings of illegal state aid in LuxLeaks-related cases. The debate between tax avoidance and tax competition is real, and serious economists and policymakers sit on both sides of it. What the files proved, beyond dispute, was that European tax law contained a hole large enough for hundreds of multinationals to pass through, and that Luxembourg had deliberately constructed that hole, and built an economy on the income it generated. This is where the story stops being about Luxembourg and starts being about everyone watching this. When Amazon routes European profits through Luxembourg at 0.005%, those are profits generated in other countries. The customers were in Berlin, Paris, and Birmingham. The warehouses were in Poland and Germany. The delivery drivers were everywhere except Luxembourg. The economic activity that produced those profits happened across the continent, but the tax that should have funded German hospitals, French schools, and Italian infrastructure was legally redirected to a country that provided little more than a registered address. Luxembourg has since lost some of those advantages. Pressure from the OECD's Global Minimum Corporate Tax Framework, EU-wide automatic exchange of tax information, and the reputational damage from LuxLeaks itself have all narrowed the gaps. The specific sweetheart deals that made those 300 arrangements possible are harder to replicate now. But the structural position, the fund industry, the bond exchange, the private banking sector, the legal infrastructure built over 60 years, that does not disappear when the tax advantages narrow. Luxembourg remains the place where European investment architecture lives. And that position, built by being first and building relentlessly, has proven extraordinarily durable. Luxembourg's story is ultimately about what a small, perfectly positioned country can achieve when it moves first and builds without stopping. No natural resources, no demographic scale, no military weight. Just sequencing, legislation, and the willingness to say yes before anyone else saw the opportunity. That logic did not originate in Europe. There is a country on the other side of the world that ran the same playbook 50 years earlier and took it further than Luxembourg ever managed. In 1965, its GDP per capita was $500, the same as Mexico, the same as South Africa. By 1990, it had already passed the colonial power that once ruled it. Today, it is the wealthiest country on earth per person by most measures. It did it by making the same kinds of early, correct, ruthless bets on what the global economy was about to reward, and never letting go of them. That video is on this channel right now.